Welcome to the Growing Embodiment Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Harris, a coach, trauma-informed breathwork facilitator, entrepreneur, longtime vegan, and fellow human being. Join me and my guests as we discuss topics ranging from self-growth and personal development to breathwork, healing, relationships, energy, spirituality, and so much more. If you've ever felt like you don't fit in and want to have a safe place to share your thoughts, work through your feelings, and explore different ideas with others who understand, or you're on a journey of self-healing and looking to reconnect with yourself and are just trying to figure out who you are and what you want, then this is the place for you. Come as you are and get ready to connect and find your way back to yourself, as that's what embodiment is all about. So glad to have you here. This is gonna be fun. Now let's get into it. Welcome to the Growing Embodiment Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Andrea Freemeyer, PhD, who is a somatic coach, breathwork facilitator, and Science of Breathwork educator, and also the woman who taught me about the science of breathwork. And she's passionate about guiding others into a deeper connection with themselves, nature, and with others. So I'm really looking forward to learning even more from her. So welcome, Andrea.
Thank you so much. I am super honored to be here having this conversation.
Yeah, I think both of us share a passion for breath work and for getting other people, explaining it to them so that they can really benefit from it as well. Because I don't know about you, but breath work definitely transformed my life as soon as I discovered it.
Same.
Yeah. So I was wondering if you could maybe explain a little bit about what breath work is, because for those who are listening, she is a neuroscientist as well and knows about all the science behind breath work. And so when people ask me all the time, like, what is breath work? And I kind of default to it's like meditation for people who struggle to meditate. It's connecting with your body and using the breath to manage stress and anxiety. But I think there's maybe a better way of explaining it. And I'd like to hear your take.
Yeah, sure. I'm not sure that I would say it's a better way of explaining it. It's just a different way of explaining it. And we're all coming into this space, like having different experiences and different backgrounds. And the beautiful thing is that, all of the benefits that you just described and are often talking to your people about are backed by science. And so we get to kind of meet both like the spiritual and like the physical and scientific with this practice. And that is one of the reasons why I am so passionate about breath work, because in my experience, and I promise I will get to what breath work is in a second, but in my experience, I was able to have like the felt sense of how breathwork impacts our bodies and our emotions and just like how we can heal through this practice. And then I was able to take my education and expertise and understanding of the brain and the nervous system and kind of put both of those together. I'm not sure that it would have worked out the other way around, because being such a logical from the mind kind of person, when I first discovered breath work, I really think I needed to have that experiential thing before I could really be like, okay, like I can see the benefits of this. So yeah, breath work is really, it's a conscious breathing practice that allows us to go into the body. So it's a bottom up healing modality. And so we're moving, we're feeling, we're connecting into the body, and we're healing like on the nervous system level. And so the beautiful thing about that is that we're able to take conscious control of our breath to shift our nervous system state. And that then influences our mind and our thoughts and so it's like, it really helps to strengthen the connection between the body and the mind. But instead of moving from the top down, like a lot of like talk therapy and like behavioral therapy kind of modalities work, we're moving from the bottom up. So we're starting in the body and then shifting. And what I have found to be so powerful about that is that when we start in the body, it becomes a sustainable healing. It's not a like, okay, I can change my thoughts. I can reframe a negative thought into a positive thought. I can, kind of work from like a cognitive place to shift where I'm at. And it does work and it is effective, but not for the long term, because then we'll get stuck in some thought and then we just kind of go off on this thought train into spiraling into negativity, where if we stimulate our nervous system and then the nervous system responds, and then it's just like this feedback between the brain and the body. So if we can heal the body where we hold stress, where we hold trauma, then we can influence our thoughts in a way that is lasting, and so deeply transformative. So
thank you for describing your journey as well, because I think a lot of people approach us from the mind first. And in general, I think in society, we prioritize the mind, and there's definitely benefits to it. We get these great discoveries, scientific breakthroughs, and all of that from the mind. And it's like you're saying, there's meeting both sides here. If we're just doing mindset work, that's where I feel we get that pushing and that forcing, like doing mantras over and over again. And it's hard. And then we can also get into the body, and that's where it becomes sustainable. It's like you don't have to do one or the other. We can meet both and have this sustainable, lasting change. And I think that's a beautiful way of describing it, of getting into the nervous system. And, we don't have to force anything here. It's just our body will tell us what we need, what it needs, and letting it come through rather than staying stuck in the mind all the time. And so you mentioned it works with the nervous system. Can you give us like a crash course on the nervous system? Because I think it's talked about, but maybe a lot of people struggle to know, well, what exactly is the nervous system? Why is it so important to healing in my day-to-day life?
Yeah. So we have obviously like the brain is part of the nervous system. But we also, so that's the central nervous system. So the brain and the spinal cord are considered the central nervous system. The part that a lot of us, and we're very, like you said, we're very focused on that, in this culture, in this society, that, our mind is so powerful. So a lot of times we're like, I can think my way out of things. I can do all of these, and we can to a certain extent. But what I have learned through this practice and through my own research is that the peripheral nervous system, which is like everything from everything outside. So it's like in the periphery, everything outside of the brain and the spinal cord. And so we have like nerves that run all throughout our bodies, nerves that control our autonomic function. So it's the autonomic nervous system that is directly impacted by how we're breathing. And so the autonomic nervous system controls our heart rate. It controls obviously our breathing rate. It controls our digestive system. It controls all of these different things that are impacting our physical health. And so there's that component of it. And then when all of those things are running smoothly and communicating well, then our mental health and our emotional health gets to improve from that. So it's like, it like you said, and like I've already said, it takes all of that working well together to have like a healthy functioning, like overall system. And that's where we really get that well-being. So the autonomic nervous system is essentially composed of two main pathways that get talked about all the time. And that is the sympathetic or fight or flight pathway, and then the parasympathetic, or what a lot of people refer to as rest and digest system. What I teach when I talk about the science of breathwork is the polyvagal theory. And there's a lot of books and research and stuff out there in support of this theory, but it's that underneath the parasympathetic pathway that there's actually two different systems there. So there's one called the ventral vagus, and these are all part of like the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is a nerve that really kind of runs and connects to like, it runs from the bottom of our skull, so like the brain stem, and all like through our face, and then all throughout our body, and connecting to all of those like quote unquote involuntary like organ systems. And the vagus nerve helps those things to function well, to function how they're supposed to. And so underneath the parasympathetic, there is the ventral vagus pathway that connects. It's like a social engagement system. It's a face to heart connection. It allows us to engage, to feel safe to engage in social situations. It allows us to feel safe to be still in our bodies. It allows us to feel safe to take action as well. And so it's really like this, like I call it like the how we access safety in the body. It is our safety pathway. Then there's also the dorsal vagus, which is basically everything below the diaphragm. And the diaphragm is a important breathing muscle right underneath the lungs, that really helps to promote like that like deep belly breath that we are always talking about in the breathwork world. And it helps to promote healthy digestion. And so that's like the part that people are always thinking about when they hear like parasympathetic, without diving deeper into that. So in normal daily functioning life, in a healthy nervous system, that part of the nervous system allows us to just like all of our organ systems to just relax and rest, so that we can digest our food, so that we can just kind of come into this state of ease, and just like it helps us to go to sleep at night. And then that ventral vagus, like I said, is the part that like helps us connect to safety or anchor into safety. We need all three. We need all of that and we need like healthy, like balance and communication between the three to have a functioning system. So in our normal everyday life, the sympathetic or the fight or flight system is important for us to allow us to take action. It gets stimulated when we exercise. It gets stimulated when, we just need to have a little energy boost in our body to do something. And what happens though is a lot of times, and how this impacts our daily life, is either that dorsal pathway of the parasympathetic or the sympathetic pathway get out of balance, where there's like this rigidity in the autonomic nervous system where our body is like responding automatically, and it's in a pattern that it's almost like we're like stuck in this pattern. And so we go more into a survival mode or a survival state. And so we're constantly, if that sympathetic is like overactivated, and we're stuck in that pattern, we are constantly like looking around like for the next threat. Like we're always on edge. Like we're always like go, go, go. We feel like we always have to be moving. If the parasympathetic, if we're stuck in that pattern, then we're just really like low energy. That's a lot of times like where, there's like numbing. We're not really feeling a lot. We're kind of shutting down, disconnecting from people. Like we don't feel safe to engage with others. We don't really feel a point of engaging with others. It's like, yeah, whatever, this isn't worth it.
Russian.
Yeah. And so we just get to that point where this, like nothing really matters. And we're just kind of going through the motions there. So that's kind of like, I hope that it was clear. Like you can have a healthy functioning system where all of these parts are working together because we need all of them, or we can go into this like these rigid patterns where we're just stuck in these survival patterns. And so we're not really living, we're surviving, we're just getting by. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot more there, but that's kind of the rundown of the nervous system, specifically the autonomic nervous system.
So we have the central nervous system, which is the one a lot of us are aware of. Mm-hmm. And then the autonomic, and it's broken down into sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Yeah.
Sympathetic and parasympathetic. And then there's two parts to the parasympathetic, and that's the ventral vagus, the safety pathway, and then the dorsal vagus, which is like rest and digest.
Okay. Yeah. And so we can get stuck in patterns if anywhere there's almost like an activation or a blockage, we can keep repeating the same behavior. And I imagine that kind of surfaces as feeling stressed or anxious, where that becomes our normal state of being. I see this all the time with clients, with myself in the past as well, where you just can't rest, or you don't even notice you're anxious because it's just the baseline.
Right.
And so is this where a practice like breath work could come in to reprogram that? Or how do we get it so that we're back in a like healthy functioning nervous system?
Yeah. So I believe, and I know because I've experienced it and guided a lot of other people through the experience of like resetting the nervous system. So like, yes, things like stress, like if we've experienced trauma, like we can get stuck in like this like cyclical like stress pathway where these stress hormones are constantly being released in our bodies, and we're feeling tension all over our body, but we're not aware of it. Like you said, like we're just like stuck and rigid, and don't even notice it because we don't stop to check in with ourselves. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what would be a sign that you are stuck in like that sympathetic or activated state?
I mean, I think it really, really just noticing like are you just like reacting to everything? Like, is everything like just a reaction? Like somebody cuts you off in traffic and it ruins your whole day, or like you're finding yourself just like never sitting down and just relaxing. Or if you do sit down and relax, you're like, gotta get up and do something, just like this, like constant, like if you're checking in with your body, it's like this like chaotic energy in your body. Your heart rate's going really fast. Your breathing a lot of times will be up in your chest, not down in your belly. So you can like check in with your breath. If for those that don't feel connected to their body and don't really know what that means yet, because that's usually where you're at when you first start doing something like breath work, it's the racing thoughts. It's like your mind just never quiets. You feel like everybody's out to get you. Like you feel like everything is a threat. There's a lot of like victim thoughts and mentality there. So that's kind of how, just like a very busy, chaotic mind, just kind of never feeling settled and always restless.
And is the opposite true then if we get stuck in that parasympathetic state? Because I think a lot of us think of being highly activated in the sympathetic, like, racing thoughts. For me, it manifested in like almost like my body was vibrating when I got an awareness of my anxiety. Like it's just like always energized, on edge kind of thing. And then the opposite in the parasympathetic, when we're stuck in that pattern of, is it like apathy, depression, feeling tired all the time, wanting to take a nap for no apparent reason.
Yeah. And it's really just that like going through the motions. Like you're just not even, like stuff doesn't really phase you, meaning like you're not constantly like reacting. You're just kind of like, yeah, nobody cares. There's a lot of like hopelessness, like the characteristics of depression, like what we describe as depression, or the symptoms of what often gets diagnosed as depression. It's just really this like you're so disconnected, like you don't feel your body. And it's not because you're not slowing down. A lot of times there is like you're lethargic, you're moving very slowly, But you're like, you're numb to your emotions, you're numb to your experience, you're just kind of, you're just kind of shut down and going through the motions.
Yeah. For me, I described myself as like a robot where I didn't have emotions for a long time. And I was probably in this state, but I didn't know it at the time. Back to the question that I kind of stopped. How do we get back to a natural, healthy, flexible nervous system that can kind of shift? Because like you said, it's good to be in an activated kind of sympathetic state for a time because we take action. And it's good to be in the parasympathetic state because we can relax and rest. And like, so going between the two of them, it's not necessarily a good or bad thing. How do we get back to being in this balanced kind of place?
So breath work obviously is one of those tools that we can use. And since that's what we're talking about, I'll focus on that. And so what breathwork does is because it is part of our autonomic nervous system, which if you haven't gathered also means like automatic, like it is this system, the autonomic nervous system does function automatically. We don't have to consciously think about, hey, heart beat, hey, stomach digest, it just happens. The beautiful thing about breathing is it does happen for us automatically, and we can take conscious control of our breath to shift how our nervous system is responding. So for instance, if you're feeling very activated in your system, you can bring your awareness to your breath. You can notice if you're breathing mostly in your chest. And and a lot of times you are, if you're feeling that like super activated or like anxious sensations of anxiety, and you can deepen your breath, like be so intentional about how you're breathing in through the nose, really slowly deepening or breathing into your belly and expanding your belly, like really getting that diaphragm to contract down to give you space for your lungs to expand. And it's like the deep, slow belly breaths it'll bring your heart rate down. It'll just kind of slow all the things down. It'll bring you back to the present moment, which a lot of times when we're in that activated state, we're not really present. And so by using your breath, this thing that we all have access to, and taking, conscious control of it, you can really help to shift your nervous system out of a hyper activated state. So you can do that by, like I said, slowing the breath down, connecting to the ground, just like really coming into the present moment and being aware of what's here. You can also so that'll kind of bring you out of that activated state and back into like a little bit, bring in some more of that like parasympathetic energy. And then you can also, if you're in like that down, like numb, checked out kind of state, you can bring in a more activating breath. So a breath that's gonna kind of like help to increase your heart rate and help to just kind of jumpstart your system and bring you back online. And sometimes that's what we need when we're just like so disconnected and numb and checked out. So it brings us back into connection with the body, feeling the sensations, feeling the emotions, feeling what's here. So you can use, depending on the breath pattern that you're using and how you're doing it, you can bring yourself out of these different states. In some cases, it's harder than others, right? So like if we're in a super checked out state, disassociated, like really have been living in that like numb survival state for a long time, we might have a breathwork experience and be like, oh my God, like I felt here, I felt alive. But then we just kind of go back to that, to that pattern, because our nervous systems are, we have these patterns. And when we've been living one way for a long time, that pattern is so strong. And so even if we get this like jump start, then we stop and have that experience, we might go back to that place. And the same goes for being in that super activated state, bringing ourselves to calm. It's like when that kind of dissipates, then we go back into that patterned response. So the more that you practice breath work, and it doesn't have to be like laying down for an hour and doing this like deep, intense session. It's really, what's most important is just by being aware of your breath and using the different patterns that and that I know to help guide ourselves and guide others into like bringing in flexibility to the system. So like when we do a practice like this and we do it regularly, we repattern our nervous system. And again, this isn't just about the body, because when we repattern and reset our autonomic nervous system, also important, connecting back to safety. So bringing that ventral vagus pathway online, like I'm here in my body, I'm connected, I'm safe. It's always communicating to the central nervous system. And so the thoughts that we can shift become like, oh, I can shift this thought. I can have a bigger perspective. I can, you become more awake, more conscious of what's actually happening, instead of being so just in this like little really narrow frame of mind where you can't see outside of your suffering. You can't see outside of your struggle. So it works from the bottom up, but it promotes, mental health and psychological health, because we're also, when we shift things in our body, we're also shifting things in our brain and in our thought processes and all of that stuff. So when we are able to break out of the patterns of rigidity, we bring in more ease, we bring in more flexibility to move through life, because life is unpredictable, right? And we're like constantly, there's like different circumstances are put in our path, and it also, like, we get to decide how we respond to what happens. Things happen and a lot of it's out of our control, but what we can control is how we're showing up. We can control how we're breathing. We can control, what it is that we're choosing to keep strengthening. Are we going to continue to strengthen that survival pathway even more? Or are we going to kind of shift out of that into something that's more flexible, that widens our ability to tolerate stress, that widens our ability to move through life with more ease? And so breath work, it's such a powerful and simple practice that we can use in our lives to really repattern that. And it does take time. And it takes, awareness of your past and what traumas are there. And you don't necessarily need to know the details of what happened, but you get to connect with the sensations, the stuff that's still held in your body, so that you can acknowledge it, you can be with it, you can love it. And then you can like move some of that energy using the breath. And so one of the things that we talk about in the breathwork training that you did and that I'm a mentor in is being trauma informed. So being aware that like everybody is coming with their own stuff, with their own experiences, and we can't know where that person's like nervous system is, like, and we don't know what they've been through. And so really allowing everybody the space to kind of do things on their own, like to decide, okay, I'm ready to go into this. I'm ready to feel this. So we get to titrate our experience when we're doing this too. So yeah, like we get to move slow. We get to find safety in our body. Super important, finding safety, having that foundation of safety, so that then we can feel the activation of the sympathetic and feel safe to be there. And then we can feel the rest and the stillness when we're in the parasympathetic and feel safe to be there. Yeah. So the breath is awesome.
Yeah. It's not just breathing in some air and like, okay, I breathed for an hour and now go on with my day. It sounds like it's really essentially just creating safety within your body to feel all these different states. It's almost like that neuroplasticity of like reprogramming, showing, I don't know if it's a subconscious or conscious level, but showing your body it's okay that I can be like this. It's okay to be like this. It's really just from the body up, like you said, like that bottom up healing of I can be activated and I'm still safe. I can be resting and actually be present and still be safe. And then it widens, it sounds like it gets you out of that survival state, brings you into safety, and then you're able to have experiences, heal, release, whatever it is that you need to do. And like you said, we're trauma informed. Your body will lead you wherever it needs to go. So you don't necessarily have to like be walked back into a particular traumatic event that's not trauma informed at all in order to re-experience it and then release it. It's like there's another way of creating safety so that your body can actually release that energy, release the thought pattern, whatever it is that is going on. So it sounds like it's really just focused on safety within yourself. And then that translates into the outer world, because one of the things that I've been thinking about and realizing and reflecting on is that safety comes from within. We can try and create a safe space and someone can still walk in and be triggered because safety is within yourself. And so breath work is really teaching yourself that it's okay to be with yourself. It's okay to have these experiences, emotions, feelings, thoughts, and release them if it's not serving you. So it sounds, I mean, it doesn't just sound, I know how powerful breath work is. That's why I practice it and facilitate other people. But then who would you say breath work is for? Is it just for people who have had trauma, or like?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of like our discussion a little bit before the recording started, it really is for everybody. I mean, there are contraindications. There are, as facilitators, there are certain, like we need to know a certain amount of history, of health history and medical history, emotional history, just so that we can best support and guide who it is that we're facilitating for. And so there are like certain like people that have unchecked blood pressure or high blood pressure that is not medicated, perhaps, not necessarily saying that's the best way to control our blood pressure, but when we're starting a practice like this, there are certain things that we just need to be aware of. And so what I always like to do with my clients, of course, is getting that like health history and understanding where they're coming from. And there are certain things that we need to get like medical doctor approval for. But I believe that everybody can do a breathwork practice, because all that we're doing is consciously changing how we're breathing. So that doesn't mean that we need to bring somebody into a state of activation. It doesn't mean that we need to, so like we can meet the person where they're at, having some understanding of where they're coming from, and guide them based on that in the safest way possible. So like, I think it's for everybody, somebody who is willing and open to it. But the first and most important thing is guiding them to find safety. Because if somebody doesn't feel safe in their body, and maybe they have a lot of trauma, maybe it's sometimes there's things that have happened to us or things that have happened in our lives that we wouldn't even define or identify as trauma, but it's more about like, what's the state of your nervous system? And so, and a lot of people won't know that because maybe they're so disconnected from their body. So what I always do is start super slow with my clients. We really talk a lot about the potential things that could come up with a breathwork practice. And we start slow and just kind of see, like, just introducing like little sips of air, of different kind of breathing, different energies into their body so that they can feel it and be like, okay, like I feel that, that's okay. I feel safe. Okay, I think I can go a little more. And it's titrating again. That's like titration of the experience. So I always, with new breathers, that's what we do first. And I just kind of see how they respond. We have a conversation about it, and then we kind of move forward from there. So, obviously it's different if you have somebody that comes to you that's like, I've experienced breath work before and I've been doing this for, whatever, and I'm connected, I have a connection to my body, and I just want to go deeper. And I have a very specific goal in mind for the session, then you can do that. But when somebody's new to it and you don't really know, and they don't really know, it's just always best to start slow. And, but yeah, just breathing like deep, slow belly breaths is beneficial for everybody. And so yeah, I don't think that there's necessarily people that should be excluded from being able to practice breath work, but maybe they don't get exposed to some of the patterns that may not be beneficial for them. So yeah, it's just really being mindful and being aware and being educated, informed about that's why it's important, I think, for facilitators to understand the nervous system, at least on some level.
So what kind of benefits can someone have if they're maybe thinking, okay, I don't know if I'm necessarily activated, or like you said, the state of my nervous system right now, and they decide I'm going to start slow. What are some of the things that they could experience either in a session or outside of a session and be like, oh, okay, this is like a tangible thing that I'm experiencing? How do they know the breath work is working, I guess, once they've done it? It's like, oh, if I'm going to invest the time and energy into a breath work practice and maybe getting a facilitator, what's it going to bring? What's it going to do for me?
Yeah, obviously, like, this is going to differ from person to person and experience to experience, and how open that individual is. Because if you come into a session and you're just kind of like, yeah, I'm not convinced this is going to work, this isn't going to, whatever, like, it'll still have an impact, but the awareness isn't there, or the openness to notice. But really, it's like, at least what I'll just speak from my experience, and then some of the people that I've breathed with or that I have facilitated for, seeing the shifts in their life. It's like, you start to notice that, like, you're not so reactive, that you're like pausing more before you respond to somebody, or that what I noticed as a huge shift for me was, I used to get so frustrated in traffic. Like, I would just be like, that person cut me off. Like, it would just be like this whole thing. And it wasn't even about that. It was about all the other things that I was holding in my body. And I was just at this very I was in this just like activated, hypervigilant state without even knowing it. And what I started to realize was, like, I didn't care. I would just be like, okay, like, they're in a hurry, like, I just get to slow down. And it just, even if like somebody did something that kind of frightened me and I had to like slam on my brakes, I would have that like initial like, that happens. But then I could just let it go so easy. Like, it wouldn't just ruin the rest of my day, or even 5 minutes of my day. And so I just really started to relax a lot more. I would start to, like, feeling the connection to my body. So like noticing what was here. Before I would, walk around like with like this tension and stuff in my shoulders, and like clenching my jaw, and I didn't even know it until I started to do this. And I would find myself like feeling that tension and releasing it and being like, oh, like I'm aware of this. I'm just going to like take a moment here to like soften my jaw. I'm going to take a moment here to like let my shoulders fall down and back, and just noticing that. Obviously in relationship, like whether that be with a spouse or a partner or a boss or children, like just kind of noticing like I have more space. I have more space to hold for these people in my life, and everything isn't about me, and they're not, like realizing too, like what's theirs and what's mine, and just being able to be open to their experience and hold space for them. So just like I had a lot less frustration, a lot less irritation, I was more relaxed. And I started after some time really feeling a clarity in my mind. So I would always just kind of feel like it would just feel kind of like chaotic in my head, and those thoughts would just constantly be going. And so I would start to, and it took a while, and it would just be glimpses at a time, but I would notice a slowness in my thoughts, and like a clarity into like decision making and things. And I didn't feel so overwhelmed by life. And then I've had lots of clients that are just like, yeah, I've noticed that I've, like I sit down to write a to-do list, and every time I write one thing that I need to do, I take a few deep breaths in between. And so just noticing, just bringing awareness, like you just have more awareness of how you're breathing, more awareness of your heart rate, just more awareness of your body. That is almost like immediate, because a lot of times these are things that we just haven't checked in with in a long time. And so when we start to bring our awareness to that and our attention to those things, then we can do something about it, because we can't change anything that we're not aware of. And so I would say that's like, those are like the initial things, just like more relaxing, less frustration, less reactivity, and just more awareness.
Having that awareness of yourself, which creates spaciousness. And it sounds like the ability to just observe rather than identify with thoughts and feelings.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And with others, like what's mine, what's someone else's, and to be able to respond rather than react. Because if I have a thought and I don't immediately identify with it, then I can, observe it. Like, is this true or not?
Yeah.
Is this mine? What do I want to do with this thought, rather than like, oh, I'm angry, like someone cut me off in traffic. Well, it's probably more of a deeper issue there than just like being cut off. Yeah. It's maybe a story I have, like, oh, no one cares about me, no one sees me, and I'm angry about it. And so it's just, when you have that awareness, it just manifests in so many different ways. And it's something that I've observed too. And it just, like I was describing from my personal experience, I wouldn't have had this podcast even if I hadn't done breath work, because I didn't feel safe being seen or heard. So I couldn't put my ideas out there because I had this idea that it wasn't safe. Mm-hmm. But then through breath work and actually having someone witness me, because I remember my facilitator was like, oh no, you're going to have the camera on and you're going to keep the volume on and I'm going to hear you. Yeah. And I was like, if someone's going to hear me breathe and sigh and watch me move, and like, it's very intimate, but what you do in the session, it comes into the rest of your life. If I could be seen and heard in that intimate way, then I felt safe doing it in other ways in my life, like the podcast, like having conversations that I previously avoided with loved ones in my life, setting boundaries. So what you're describing, like I personally experienced and seen my clients experience, and it's such a powerful thing to go from reacting all the time, having all these emotions, and to be able to just like take that space and like make decisions from a point of like from choice rather than like reactionary. So really cool.
And every time we do that, every time we stop and do something different, that's repatterning. That's creating a new
Mm-hmm.
pathway in our brain so that we respond differently. Like that's the sustainability that we get. Like, and so everything that that you shared and that I shared is like, is more of like, like what are the tangible benefits that I'm going to notice? Those are the things that we see. But remember, for all of that to happen, there's this stuff happening in our physiology that we're shifting by the breath. And so it goes so beautifully together. But just remembering that that's what's happening. Like our body feels safe enough to just stop and do something different. Even if before we would have been scared to do that, even if before would have been like, no, there's no way I'm going to let somebody hear me breathe,
Yeah.
Like I feel safe enough to do that. And like you said, then it translates into other areas of your life. I feel safe enough to show up and be heard on my podcast. I feel safe enough to have these conversations. And that is the result of a new pattern that you've created in your body. And so that's it. I mean, it's so impactful, and really easy to get passionate about, I think.
Yeah. And it's always available. Like we're always breathing. We can always use it as an access point into our bodies.
Yeah.
Like the awareness you were talking about. I had a question for you, but I forgot what it was. Maybe it'll come back.
Well, I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say, like, the other huge benefit, I think, is that, and we've already spoken to it, but I'm just going to put another word to it. Like, we become empowered. Like, we are like, I don't need this. I don't need the alcohol. I don't need the food. I don't need the TV. I don't need like whatever this thing is that we're using that's outside of us as like a coping mechanism or a soothing mechanism. We tap into our breath. We tap into what's here, to all that we have to offer ourselves and the resource that we have within ourselves to hold the discomfort of whatever it is that would normally guide us to like reach for this other thing. Mm-hmm. And so we become empowered to make choices that are healthier. We become empowered to show up in a different way. And then the more that we do that, again, we're repatterning our system to be like, instead of having the self-sabotaging behaviors all the time, because it's easier and habitual, like we're like, I'm breaking those patterns, I'm breaking those habits, I'm creating new ones. And that's, I'm making choices that are beneficial for me, that are healthy, that are going to make me feel better overall. And so it's not so much about the like quick fix, and I think I don't know about you, but I've had clients that are like, so like, am I just gonna like be good now? And I'm like, well, yeah. And you get to keep showing up for yourself, because it's a continuous thing, because those again, like those patterns that we have, if we lived one way for a certain period of time, those have been reinforced over and over and over and over again for years, decades sometimes. And so now we're in this new way of being, this new way of existing, we're feeling more alive, and that's beautiful, but it doesn't always feel good, and sometimes it's being with the discomfort and allowing ourselves to be in that place, and then getting on the other side of it, that's like, wow, like maybe this doesn't always feel good, and maybe it doesn't happen super fast, but like this is real. Like this is changing my life in so many ways. And that is empowering, right? Like that is like, wow, like I'm capable of this, I am empowered to make these choices that are going to benefit me over the long term.
That empowerment that comes from like what you were saying, the spaciousness of, I get to make that empowered choice because I'm not, okay, this happens, automatic programmed response.
Yeah.
And just like do it. Now it's like, okay, something happened, and having that awareness that you're able to notice within yourself, the duality of like, I'm uncomfortable, and now I get to choose how I respond rather than, okay, I'm just going to go drink something or eat something to just kind of like soothe myself immediately. And
Yeah.
even in a breathwork session, we see that when, we talked about trauma and things can come up as we're doing breath work, and you're empowered to hold that within yourself, to process it, whether it's crying, whether it's like banging your fists against the bed, whether it's like whatever it is, moving it through your body, like with actual physical movement or vocalizing it, screaming, however you need to release it. Now you are able to hold that. And one of the phrases that like really I learned as I was going through the training was like, um, it all gets to be here, and like
Yes.
recognizing that you get to hold it all of this. It's no longer just the like self-destructive, I guess if we want to label it, kind of pattern that or self-sabotage a lot of people talk about. You're no longer automatically going into that programmed response. You're slowly over time, because as you said, it took years to build this response that you have, this reaction, this behavior, and reinforcing it constantly. It doesn't just stop overnight. And I think that's something, especially in like the personal development kind of world, is like where you see, just as an example, like New Year's. I'm going to work out on January 1st. I'm going to go to the gym every single day.
Mhm.
And it's like immediate results, and then you swing back the other way. Whereas it's like if you decide I'm going to go once a week to the gym, just as an example, and then maybe that becomes twice a week, and it's like slowly over time, it's something that's sustainable. And I think breath work is similar. You may feel those kind of benefits. Like initially, I found, with my breath, I was taking deeper breaths, um, like those sorts of things, but then different things take more time. And I think we're used to like that instant gratification. If
Mhm.
someone comes up to you and says, breath work is going to help you, I don't know, lose 20 pounds in a month, I would be questionable about that if anybody said that about something. But it does work over time because, as you said, we're reprogramming. So that's
Yeah.
just something that I kind of wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to note because I especially with students like in the training program, like there's always this like, because that is how we've done things in the past, where like I'm going to take this pill and it's going to make me feel better and I'm going to like instantly feel better and it's going to, whatever. We want it to happen fast. And so, and I still do this even after being on this journey using these modalities for years. Like patterns are still going to come up, like
Mm-hmm.
you're, again, like we've already spoken to it, but like I'm speaking to it now from a place of like, it's the breath, and this practice also allows you to bring in because you feel safe to do it, you have more self compassion for yourself. You're able to give yourself more grace. You're able to quiet that inner critic more quickly. And that doesn't mean she still doesn't show up and talk shit, I mean, but like you still get again, the spaciousness of being able to be like, man, like I engaged in that old pattern, or I did that old habit that I really do not want to do anymore. And instead of instantly spiraling into the shame and all of the things that come with that, it's like, I did that. And that sucks and it doesn't feel good. And I can try again, And so it's like just really learning how to love yourself from the inside out, pouring love into yourself instead of hate and disappointment and all of these things that we do so easily to ourselves. It's like we get to have grace for the time that it's going to take us to really get to a place where we can like sustain and be where we ultimately want to be. But it's also it's a continuous thing, but it's so beautiful. Like there's so much here. So it's so worth it.
That's a metaphor for life. Like, like it's not that the inner critic or all these different programs will disappear. we're going to continue to evolve and grow throughout life. And now we're just working on this relationship with yourself. Like something happens, you engage in an old behavior, or an old thought comes up, and you're like, oh, why did I do that? Instead of saying, I suck, something wrong with me, it's this sucks. And
Yeah.
it's just taking that judgment because you've now injected a little bit of grace in there, of observation, of spaciousness, of like, what I do doesn't necessarily mean that's who I am.
Yeah.
Like it's just an action, it's not my identity. So retraining things.
Yeah. And also remembering those nervous system patterns, right? Like, or the nervous system responses. Like, I think that the most empowering thing about having a basic understanding of the autonomic nervous system and how it functions is, and how like stress and trauma disrupt the balance and the healthy functioning of, like, is that like there's actually nothing wrong with me. My body is responding as it's supposed to. We have survival mechanisms to keep us safe, not because they're here to punish us, but because it's our body's response. Maybe we needed to shut down because something was happening that was too much for us to handle. So our body's like, you're going to shut down, you're going to disassociate from this thing because that's how you're going to survive this. But it's then, being able to then have that awareness and make that empowered choice of like, there isn't anything wrong with me. And this happened to me, but this is the choice that I'm going to make to move forward. Like, I'm going to choose to heal. I'm going to choose to show up to myself for myself,
Allowing yourself to make choices.
Yeah. A different choice.
A different choice.
Yeah.
The best choice for you in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I think we could keep talking about this for hours.
Probably.
But I will just give you the opportunity if there's anything that you would like to say to help you feel more complete, or any parting thoughts.
I guess really the only thing would just be to anybody listening to this that is searching for, a deeper connection or a way through all of the things, like just remembering that like you have access to safety within yourself, and you have the ability to tap into that at any time using your breath. Like, you get to be the pilot of your life by taking control of your breath. Like, life sometimes feels like it's taking us on this ride, and again, like, to a certain extent that is happening, but we also have the ability to shift that and to shift how we're showing up. And in doing that, we're not only we're becoming empowered, but we're also remembering the power that we have within us, because so much of the way that this society is set up is to we are giving our power away constantly to something outside of us. And so it's like, just take the time to come inward, take the time to be with yourself, to be with what's here, remembering that safety as you're being with it. And yeah, just remembering to breathe, and that sounds so cliche, but it's like, but literally, like, sometimes the simplest things are the most impactful. So it doesn't have to be hard.
Yeah.
It can
be as easy as breathing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And if someone is interested in working with you or asking questions, learning more, where can they find you?
Mostly Instagram. Instagram is probably the main place that I show up. I am not a super consistent person on there, but I do show up. And so my Instagram is just my name, Andrea Freemeyer. And then also an email address if anybody just wants to reach out that way. I do check those often. And the best email is Andrea Freemeyer coaching at gmail.com. And maybe you can put those in the notes or whatever. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And I love to talk about this stuff. So yeah, anybody reach out if you feel called.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you. This was great.
Well, that's all for today. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Growing Embodiment podcast. I'd love to connect, and you can find us on all social media platforms at Growing Embodiment. Please also join our Facebook community, the Growing Embodiment community. We'd love to have you there. And the one thing that I ask is if you found value in this podcast, please share it with a friend, like, follow, all that beautiful stuff. I can't wait to see you next week. Until then, have a wonderful day.